Have you ever written a song before?
Oh, definitely when I was in like middle school, I tried.
Yeah?
It was bad.
What could it have been about?
It was probably an attempt at a love song by someone who knew absolutely jack all about it.
I love that.
It's a real sore spot for me because I love reading, I love poetry, I love music. Yeah. I can't generate poems or songs. They're all bad.
Well, Emily, I can tell you for a fact that that's not true. I know for a fact that you did write a song because we did it recently.
Oh, that's true. That is true.
Yeah, it was our Patreon episode last month, I believe.
Yes, we wrote a song about, well, Ron wrote a song. We brainstormed.
Yeah, we did an episode with our friend, Ronnie Gross Jr., and it was all about songwriting. Ronnie was a guest on episode 65, Greeble, and he's a good friend of the podcast, and we said, hey, come on, let's talk about songwriting. And then I guess it was Seth decided that 50 minutes would be enough for the three of us to write
and I think it was.
Do you? How do you feel that went?
I think it went great, and we're about to prove it. Possibly.
In the beginning, 1,000 years ago, in the Elam, when matter was formed, there was an old man who compiled a list of every single word in existence. He had time, but he needed help with his list of words they called the lexicon account. So he found 3 hearts that were pure and true, and they vowed to keep the words safe. And the world could use just a word or two to fill the air with magic and love. Butter, no parsnips. It's Kyle and Emily and Seth is in the dungeon. Butter, no parsnips. I still don't understand what that means. Butter, no parsnips. You learn a thing or two about where words come from. It's a podcast so you can listen on your way to work. The episodes are short and they're kinda cute as well. Ooh yeah, etymological from the girls.
With the girls.
Hey everybody, welcome to Butter No Parsnips. I'm Emily Moyers.
And I'm Kyle Imperator.
And that was Ronnie Gross Jr. performing his ballad of Butter No Parsnips, which I just have to say I loved that it was completely unrelated to the song that we wrote.
Which means that Ron
took that and said, good boy, there's nothing I can do with this hot garbage. Gonna have to start from scratch.
What can I salvage here? The title of the podcast. For those of you at home, Ronnie's new album, Emotional Boy, releases this week on June 27th.
Yes, it does. You can follow at Ronnie Gross Jr., RONNIE Jr. Jr. on Instagram and TikTok, and you can go to the link in his bio to pre-save his album.
And on the 27th, it'll be available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, or anywhere you can stream music. So go out, give it a listen again and again and again.
But until then, Kyle, do you have a word to bide our time?
Oh, you'd like a word to bide the audience's time, would you, Emily?
And mine.
Oh, and your time. All right. Well, listen, since you ask so nicely, I'm willing to give you just this once a word.
Nice.
Emily, your word today is appoggiatura.
Oh,
Appoggiatura. Appoggiatura.
Wow. I mean, can I send this one back to the chef?
You can, but the chef has died, so it's not going to help you any.
Appoggiatura. I mean, I don't know if I'm just in the mindset because we're coming off of talking about music, but this feels like a musical word to me. It's got that Italian Like it would be in the sheet music kind of a look to it.
Just like all Italians I know, they are in the sheet music.
Well, but like, all those words in the corner.
In the corner. They just write a bunch in the corner of the page and like, you might need to know this.
I can't even think what part of speech. I mean, I guess it's gotta be an adjective or a noun.
The second one. It's a noun.
It's a noun. An appoggiatura.
An appoggiatura.
I mean, my gut instinct is that this is like a type of a song, a type of piece of music. Is that enough of a guess?
I mean, yeah, it's enough of a guess. It's wrong.
All right.
Think smaller.
Give me a hint, Kyle, aside from the one you just gave me.
Yeah, you get 2 hints today. Your second hint, Emily, is suspense.
Oh, is it like... Well, no, there's another word for that, isn't there? What's the word? Don't tell me the definition of this word. Just tell me a different word.
Yeah. Let's hear it.
What's the word for when, like, the conductor can hold out as long as they want on a note or a rest?
That is a fermata.
Fermata.
Yeah, and that's not.
Is this the
same? No, it's different. It's a different type of suspense we're going for.
Okay. Is this maybe like rising action in the music? That's my guess. It's like when the music like builds but doesn't quite hit the climactic finish yet. It's just building.
It's a great guess, Emily. That's really good. I don't know if there is a word for that, but this isn't it.
That's fair.
So we'll come up with a word for that later. Okay. But Emily, I'm going to tell you that an appoggiatura in music is an embellishing note preceding and acting as support to an essential note of a melody. It's kind of a little specific term in music, but it can also be used in a transferred sense to mean a prop or a point of support.
That's fun.
Emily, you guessed right. It's a music episode, all right? We're going to talk all about music today. It makes sense.
We're celebrating Ron.
This is all about Ron today.
This is all about Ron.
We know how much Ron loves classical music.
And we know how much you, our audience, loves Ron.
So exactly.
Just hold him in your heart as we go through this unrelated conversation about classical music.
So, Emily, the word appoggiatura is borrowed directly from the Italian appoggiatura. There you go.
Yeah, I guessed that one.
That noun is derived from the verb appoggiare, meaning to support, to lean on, or to rest on. And that comes from the vulgar Latin appoggiare, or appoggio, meaning support.
There you go.
We all need to support each other in these trying times.
It's true. We all need somebody to lean on.
Yeah, we all need somebody to lean on. That song's about appoggiaturas, if you can believe it.
It is, I guess.
Yeah, well, in a transferred sense. So that Latin verb uses the prefix ad, ad, which means to or towards. We've talked about that, I'm sure, 1 million times on the podcast. I feel like it's a pretty
At
popular.
least once, maybe.
Yeah. And the prefix ultimately comes from a Proto-Indo-European root, ched, meaning to, at, or near.
You need a hanky, Kyle?
I guess I got something in my... But the real root of the word, Emily, comes from the Latin podium, meaning balcony, especially in an amphitheater. And it's from whence we get our English podium.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Referring to a platform such as one a conductor might use.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right?
I was thinking like a lectern, but yeah.
A podium is borrowed from the ancient Greek podion, meaning foot of a vase or base. And that comes from pus, meaning foot or leg, ultimately from the Proto-Indo-European prefix ped, meaning to walk, to step, or to stumble, or to fall.
Sure, like podiatrist, although that's with an O.
Yes, but also like, if you remember from episode 79, peccant. In a allegorical sense, to stumble or to fall is in to fall off the track. Become wayward and sinful. So, Emily, that's the etymology of appoggiatura, but there's so much more that goes into appoggiatura.
It feels like it.
It's such a word that's filled with emotion, you know?
I don't know, Kyle. Tell me.
So the appoggiatura as a term in music originated during the Baroque period of classical music in the 17th century. Emily, what do you know about Baroque music?
So it's like I know that there were all the periods, but I don't know who is in what. Is Bach Baroque?
J.S. Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, is Baroque. He's a Baroque composer.
Okay.
His children, he had like 20. I think 10 died, and then the other 10 all became composers. But since they lived later than him, they were in the after period.
I feel like that was like the scheme of parenting.
Yeah, I mean, in that time period, yes, it was. That's why your last name was just your job, because that's what it was assumed would be all of your family's jobs forever.
Yeah, and you pump out as many as you can.
Yeah,
because half of them will die.
Half of them will die.
Oh, wow, that's fun though that all of his children were composers.
Yeah, I mean most of them. I'm not sure if it was
just
all of them.
Just the family biz.
And like famous composers too.
But that sound of Bach's music, is that like iconic of the Baroque period?
Yeah, so Baroque covers kind of a wide selection of styles of music during the 17th century. Like a lot of people were writing music that were kind of like that. I don't know if they necessarily called their music Baroque at that time, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, Bach was the big one. George Frideric Handel of the Hallelujah Chorus and his Messiah is another big one. Vivaldi, his Four Seasons, not the landscaping company.
I'm thinking of the type of musical thing called a fugue. Is that a Baroque thing?
Yeah, that is a Baroque form of music. We could get into that. We would spend hours getting into that.
Sure, I don't want to open that can of worms with you, because you know a lot about this, Kyle. You're pretty smart.
Thank you. Watch as I get the whole episode wrong. So, Emily, the term Baroque possibly comes from the Middle French baroque, which originally denoted a pearl of irregular shape.
What?
I know, right? And I'll tell you why.
What's the link?
So that word comes from either the Italian barocco, the Spanish barroco, or the Portuguese barroco. I hope there are no Portuguese listeners. And all of those may have stemmed from the Latin verruca, which was the Latin word for a wart, and then eventually was used to describe an abnormality on a precious stone.
And we used it to describe music?
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute, Emily.
Okay.
Verruca, that Latin word, verruca, is also come to English as verruca and means wart, especially one on your foot is a verruca.
That's what verruca salt means?
Yeah, she's a salt wart.
She's a salt wart on your foot.
On your foot. So that's one of the suggested etymologies for the term Baroque. And in a little bit, you'll see why that's one of them. Another one is that it may come from the mnemonic word Barocco, Baroco. And Barocco was used in Aristotelian logic to memorize one specific type of syllogism, which was a kind of logical argument, out of 256 possible others. So like all of the arguments had like formats, and they all had words associated with them to remember the format.
Sure, I guess you'd have to if there were 200 and something of them.
So many, yeah. And not all of them were like a true syllogism. So a syllogism, like the example that Wikipedia gives, is all men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Right. It's like if A, then...
Exactly. Yeah. So we won't delve into this much further, but in the case of Barocco, it's referring to a syllogism that employs the premises and a conclusion of types A, O, and O, hence B-A-R-O-C-O, Barocco.
Okay. Does
That's
it like
where that comes
stand for like words, or is it
Nope.
more of like a
It is
logical equation?
It is not an acronym. It is literally just to remember the order A-O-O. That's it.
Wow.
That's
crazy.
That is what the word exists for. Yeah. Anyways, in the 1700s, Emily, Baroque came into use to describe as I said earlier, a wide range of heavily ornamented and extravagant styles of both architecture and music from the previous century. It's referring back to the 1600s.
Right.
And using this term for that type of architecture and music led to Baroque as an English word meaning ornate or complex and beautiful despite outward irregularity, and it could figuratively mean needlessly complicated. And Baroque music in particular was extremely needlessly complicated. It was very laden with rules that kind of just existed to exist, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Sort of like Ulipin music.
Yes, but less fun. And more pedantic. So one of the most striking and recognizable features of Baroque music is its ornamentation, which is a term in music that describes those types of little musical baubles of which we consider the appoggiatura to be one of.
Just like sort of extra notes thrown in.
Yeah, extra notes and frills and fancy little change-ups to make the music sound, it gives me goosebumps in my tummy, you know?
I mean, it's fun to listen to. I grew up on an album of Bach that was synthified. It's called Switched on Bach. It's very fun. And I think that's where all of my appreciation for classical music comes from. That and Fantasia.
Totally fair. There was plenty of revivals of Baroque music that, is like, wow, yeah, this stuff is good. And Baroque music, when it gets computerified, you're like, this is computer music. This was meant to be computer music because it's so logical.
Because it has all those layers and
So, Emily, in an early text on Baroque music, Pier Francesco Tozzi wrote in his 1723 Opinioni dei cantori antichi e moderni, which was translated as Observations on the Florid Song. Ooh. He wrote this: among all the embellishments in the art of singing, there is none so easy for the master to teach or less difficult for the scholar to learn than the appoggiatura.
Well, then teach it to me, Kyle.
Well, I'd love to, Emily. Yet, just a short, almost 200 years later, in 1911, the music critic John Alexander Fuller Maitland writes in his article, The Interpretation of Musical Ornaments, "It is in the case of the appoggiatura that the greatest confusion reigns, and it is the more curious that it should be so, since of all the ornaments, this one has lingered longest in practical music." What happened, Emily?
Did we get it wrong somewhere along the way? Appoggiatura used to be just a little note thrown in, and then somebody thought, no, an appoggiatura is like when you have to fix your whole car in the middle of performing.
No, but I think that's the next evolution of the appoggiatura. You really hit it. So today, one can generally describe an appoggiatura as a note in a melody that does not fall within the chord, but is given emphasis before moving back to a note in the chord. Okay?
Like when it, just before it hits the home note, you'll get that kind of dissonant chord, and then it does, it resolves.
Resolution is a big part of it. The whole point of the appoggiatura is to delay the resolution of the chord, is to make more suspense.
There's one little wonky note in there that doesn't feel right, and then it fixes.
It's not always wonky, and it's always on the downbeat of a chord. But I've got some examples for you, Emily.
Yeah.
So, the idea is that it delays the arrival of the harmonic note, thus providing suspense. So, this first example I have for you is Happy Birthday, but without the appoggiatura. Did you notice where the appoggiatura was missing?
The beginning was different.
Birth, right? Happy birthday.
Okay.
Now here's the second example with the appoggiatura included. Happy birthday. Because birth there on birthday is not in the chord. It is outside of the chord, and it's delaying you getting to the tonic there.
It's like it's such a familiar tune. I never would have heard that it wasn't in the chord.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a really kind of wonky tune because there's appoggiaturas all over the place in it. It actually happens later on the name portion in Happy Birthday. Da da, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I guess this is why anytime you have like your office party trying to sing Happy Birthday, it sounds so bad. It's because it's actually full of all these weird notes.
I mean, they're not wrong notes. They're just kind of embellishing the melody, you know? It'd be boring if they weren't in there, you know?
Right.
It can be debated that there are many other qualifications that must be met for something to actually be regarded as an appoggiatura, especially in the Baroque use of the word. But this is the gist. The whole point is we're going to wait for the tonic. We're going to wait for the main note, you know, because it's fun.
Right.
Prior to appoggiatura becoming the standard term, there was the back fall, which describes the descending type, as in Happy Birthday, right?
Yeah.
And then there was also the forefall for one that goes down and resolves up. And here's Happy Birthday if it were using a forefall.
Oh.
See, it kind of goes down and then up.
That's like Happy Birthday, but it's in a horror movie.
In a horror movie.
The birthday person's about to die.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that could happen on any of our birthdays, let's be honest.
Wow, dark, Kyle.
Happy birthday, Kyle. Okay, so...
I was going to say, dark from a guy whose birthday is coming up.
So, Emily, there was also a period where there was no standardization for the way that appoggiaturas could be notated in music. So it could be written as a hook before a note, which was basically an open parenthesis. It could be a dash connecting the notes, or it could just be a comma between them, depending on who was writing, what the instrument was being written for, you know, all that kind of stuff.
So it would be a symbol before the note that is the appoggiatura, or before the note that is the resolution? Okay.
So like in Happy Birthday, it would be Happy Birth. That note would be written out.
It would be written as the note that you're not doing, and then with a mark?
The first note in that is the appoggiatura note, and it's insinuated. So you just know to do that because of the mark.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, Emily.
Music notation is insane.
The type of notation that stuck, that ended up sticking around, is what we call today a grace note, which is basically a smaller note, musical superscript or subscript, if you will, and it shows you what note you should be performing, and it comes, you know, it shows it right before that note.
Yes, I've seen that, but I've seen that used in a context where you sing both in like quick succession.
It's great that you bring that up, because this usage of the grace note became super confusing, because there were also what I talked to you about today was called a long appoggiatura, because there were short appoggiaturas, and these were notated exactly the same, except there was a line through the stem of that grace note, and these would be performed just like long appoggiaturas on the beat. And here's an example of that.
Yeah, that I've seen that before. Is that more common today?
Yes, basically because we don't use grace notes for notating appoggiaturas anymore. We just write it in the music. Yeah. We just write the notes out.
It seems like that would be easier if it was just there. Because like it sort of feels like, at least with the Happy Birthday example, like you don't necessarily need to know when you're performing it that it's an appoggiatura. It's just the note in the melody. Because it doesn't change the way you perform it necessarily.
But originally it wasn't necessarily a part of the melody. It was an addition to the melody. Do you know what I mean?
But it's part of the melody.
So it wasn't originally part of the melody, it was added to the song. Like if someone's singing a remake of a song, you know, and they add their own little special notes to it. That's kind of what an appoggiatura is. You know what I mean? It's not a part of the melody. We might then learn that as a part of the melody. Do you know what I mean?
Got you. So the composer isn't necessarily predetermining what the appoggiatura note is going to be. They're just telling you, like, here's where it is, and you can sing a different note here.
No, and we'll get to that. So the short appoggiaturas were often described in the opposite way that long appoggiaturas were. Long appoggiaturas were said you should be leaning on that first note, the da-da.
The off note, yeah.
Yes, but in short appoggiaturas, they were described as, no, you should lean on the melody note, not the appoggiatura note. So da-da, like that.
Yeah, it's just like a little flourish.
Emily, this created so much ambiguity, leading some to believe that the short appoggiatura should come before the melody note, as in this example. So it's a slight difference, but in that example, day comes on the downbeat. Happy birthday to you. Instead
so it's just
of
like
happy,
a rhythmic change.
It's basically like the note comes sooner. It's not taking away from the melody note. It's taking away from the note before it, time-wise. Do you know what I mean?
Got it. Got it. Yeah.
So Maitland, who is that 1911 writer from earlier, attributes this problem to the fact that very often editors and publishers have not been sufficiently careful to distinguish between the small note with a stroke through it and the small note without a stroke. So basically, people just weren't very good when they were rewriting scores to take care, and it just got confusing. People just started making it up.
Like, you've already decided that the note is going to be tinier on the page.
Yep.
And then you said there's going to be two different kinds of tiny notes that are only different by a little line.
Yeah.
That is probably going to blend in, because I feel like a lot of times the superscript note is an eighth note, so it's already got a flag on it, and then you're going to add another line.
Yep. You got it, Em. You got it. On top of all of this, Emily, ornamentation in Baroque music as a concept seems to have been originally improvisatory in nature. And so it wasn't written out. It was just left to the discretion of the musician, which was often a vocalist, meaning that we just didn't have these types of ornamentation written out in music. We can guess, based on writing of the time, when singers and performers might have used an appoggiatura in music, but it wasn't written out.
I feel like that still happens if there's like a real like money note in a score. I feel like I've seen where like there's the beginning of the note in the sheet music and the end of that note, but then the middle there's just like a space that's like, singer, do what you want there.
Well, especially if it's being a written out version of a song that is sung. You know what I mean? If it's a song that has been improvised, absolutely.
Yeah, there's space.
Ambiguity. Yeah.
It's like written in the script that like the singer in the score that the singer could do what they want in this section.
And as time passed, composers did decide to write in their own ornamentation, Baroque composers. And not everyone was happy with that, Emily. Tosi, who was the 1700s writer I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I guess I missed the name Tosi before. That's hilarious. That's a hilarious name.
Yeah, his name is Tosi.
It sounds like a 1930s mob boss.
See, to me, it sounds like what you'd call your children's toes.
I mean, sure, Kyle, if we're going to be basic about it. But I'm thinking like
Such
Tosi McGee.
Well, I mean, he's Italian. What can you say? So after listing 15 rules on when to use the appoggiatura, and that's how much rules were in Baroque music, Tosi wrote on further. If the scholar be well instructed in this, he will laugh at those composers that mark them with a design either to be thought modern or to show that they understand the art of singing better than the singers. Poor Italy! Pray tell me, do not the singers nowadays know when the appoggiaturas are to be made, unless they are pointed at with a finger? Oh, injurious insult to you modern singers who submit to instructions fit for children.
Yeah, this does seem like exactly the kind of thing a singer would resent immensely.
Yep. Absolutely. Don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me how to sing.
It's like, all right, music man, sitting in front of your piano. I know what I'm doing. Get out of here.
Okay, Emily, let's pull back for a broader picture now, okay?
Oh, okay.
So the OED offers a transferred sense of appoggiatura to mean a prop or a point of support, right?
Yeah.
I think I found an example of this, and
Okay.
I think it's in the Table Talk of Samuel Coleridge Taylor, a collection. You know what? Hold on. Let me just make sure I got that right.
I think it's Samuel Taylor.
Taylor Coleridge, because there's a composer, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, and I
That's
always confuse the two.
That's
I
insane.
know.
Don't even take this out as a blooper because that's insane.
Isn't that insane? Oh. So, yeah, there's a piece called The Table Talk of Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Yeah, there's a poet, Samuel Taylor Coleridge.
Yeah. And basically, I found out that a table talk is a format, and it's basically when somebody like jots down the ramblings of someone.
That's good.
Yeah, it's called a table talk. And so this is of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And in one passage, he's chatting about the fuller, more passionate style of earlier Greek oratory in comparison with its immediate successor in the Alexandrian era. And he says, in the latter, there are in the same number of lines fewer words by one half than in the Iliad. All the appoggiaturas of time are lost.
That's good. That is a good transfer of that word.
Right? Yeah, it's pretty good. And I have one more, more broad quote for you, Emily. This one's a little more on the nose, and it comes from the mind of English naturalist Bruce Frederick Cummings. Cummings wrote under the pen name Wilhelm Nero Pilate Barbellion from the German Emperor Wilhelm II, Roman Emperor Nero, and Jesus Crucifier Pontius Pilate, who he believed were examples of the most wretched men ever to have lived.
Wow. Dang. Okay.
Yeah, Emily. So, judging from that, his diaries he published together as one book titled The Journal of a Disappointed Man. And it sure does not disappoint. I only have one small quote to bring to the table from this.
Okay.
But someone is like, wow, you're with your friend all the time. You just do everything he does. Like, you act just like him. And he's mad because he's like, yeah, we're friends, but I'm my own guy.
Uh-huh.
And he says, as we are inseparable friends, everybody assumes that I am his tacky lackey, a kind of appoggiatura to his big note. And I just love that.
That is also a good transfer of that.
And one other bit, Emily, that I just thought was fun, and I threw on the end here, that Italian word, appoggiatura, today can also be used in a theatrical context to mean a strong emphasis in intonation on the key word of a joke, which I think is fun, and we don't have a word for.
That's a good concept to have a word for.
Right? Emily, that's appoggiatura. That's appoggiatura.
Yeah, so that was like the little supporting episode, and now Kyle's going to do the real episode.
Oh, God. Spare me. Emily, I've got to ask you a question now.
Yeah. Can
Can you use appoggiatura in a sentence?
I'm sure I can, theoretically.
Theoretically.
Okay. We are now reaching the climactic and final movement of this episode. And now, as we do the appoggiatura of me trying to use this word in a sentence, we will eventually get to the money note of the minigame. Did that work?
I don't know.
I guess I'm thinking of it like a denouement.
Yeah, it's not a denouement, it's supporting. I would say more like our witty banter was the appoggiatura to the grand finale of this.
Perfect.
Yeah, something like that. Emily, it's great. It's perfect. Appoggiatura, we all know it. We all love it.
Kyle, this was a really good word.
Thank you, Emily. Would you like to play a game now?
I would so like to play a game.
Wonderful. I'm hoping it'll be a brief game. It's called Grace Against the Clock.
It better be a brief game. I'm gracing against the clock.
So, Baroque music incorporated other types of musical graces besides the appoggiatura, Emily. So, I will give you a short etymology and a definition, and you will have to guess the correct term from the following word bank The words that you have are appoggiatura, glissando, mordant, trill, and turn.
Okay, a couple of those I think I know, so we'll see how I do.
We'll see. So your first clue, Emily, this term gets its name and symbol, which is a sort of sideways S, from the winding way it's performed, starting with the note above the one indicated, the note itself, the note below, and then the note itself again, as in this example.
Oh, boy, I'm really doubting myself now. I'm doubting myself that it's either of the ones that I think I know, so I'm going to take a random guess that it's an appoggiatura.
It is not an appoggiatura, Emily. The answer is turn. That was a turn.
Okay. A turn.
So our English term comes from the ancient Greek word tornos, and that was a tool similar to a pair of compasses used to draw a circle.
Oh.
That's where we get turn from. Isn't that interesting?
Sure. I can see that logic. I like that.
Next clue, Emily.
Yeah.
From the Italian for biting, this ornament consists of a single alternation between a pitch and the one immediately below it, as famously heard at the beginning of J.S. Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. Here an example.
That one's a trill. At least it better
but you
be.
said it with such confidence, Emily.
Oh, but that's what I thought. Isn't that what it is?
A trill is when that happens a long time.
Oh, so there's a different word when it's short?
When it's just once, Emily, it's called a mordant.
That's annoying.
From the Italian mordere and Latin mordeo, meaning to bite.
What are these 10 years of choir practice for, Kyle? I'm getting them wrong.
Well, you didn't sing Baroque music for 10 years.
It's true. Although I did do some Handel.
Here's your last one, Emily. You're going to get this. I have a feeling.
Okay.
This, Grace, from the Italian for to crush, is now the preferred term for the short appoggiatura, though it was originally a slightly different keyboard ornament.
Is that one a cacciatura?
That one is a cacciatura, Emily. You keep saying cacciatura like it's cacciatura, like it's a dish.
What cacciatori? I'm literally looking at it written out too, and I can't even say
a cacciatura. Yes, and a cacciatura, Emily. It comes from the Italian verb acciaccare, and it's onomatopoeic.
Oh.
I don't know for what, but it was. And it originally applied to a note of an arpeggiated chord, which is when a chord is broken up a bit. And it was struck simultaneously with an arpeggiated chord and then immediately released. And here's my paltry example of that. So there's like a da-da kind of little thing in there.
Sure, I hear that.
Appoggiatura, for those at home who are wondering, is spelled Accicciatura. Appoggiatura.
I think I was pronouncing it wrong because I was sort of blending it with appoggiatura.
And we're all hungry all the time. So
it's true. It's true. I really just want some cacciatura.
Emily, that was your musical episode.
Fantastic, Kyle. Loved every minute of it, even when I was getting it wrong.
I'm so glad you did.
Well, everybody, remember that you can find Butter No Parsnips on social media. On Facebook and Instagram at Butter No Parsnips Podcast, and on TikTok at Butter No Parsnips. And if you liked today's episode, consider giving us a 5-star rating or review wherever you heard us.
And if you really liked today's episode, consider donating to our Patreon at patreon.com/butternoparsnips. Donating $5 or more earns you a shout out, either on social media or here on the podcast.
Oh, and also remember to pre-save Ronnie Gross Jr.'s new album, Emotional Boy, out June 27th by visiting his bio on Instagram or TikTok at Ronnie Gross Jr.
Thanks so much, Ronnie, for that fantastic Butter No Parsnips ballad. And thanks to all of you. You help us make what we make.
And with that, I've been Emily Moyers.
And I've been Kyle Imperator, and this has been Butter No Parsnips.
It's a podcast so you can listen on your way to work. The episodes are short and they're kind of cute as well. Ooh yeah, etymological from the girls.
Butter No Parsnips is produced by Seth Glicksman, Emily Moyers, and myself, Kyle Imperator. The main theme was composed by Ronnie Gross Jr., and accompanying themes were composed by Kyle Imperator.